Okay, point number 4. Base yourself in Sangharakshita, in Bhante's presentation of the Dharma. Yes, base yourself in Sangharakshita's presentation of the Dharma. Buddhism is not a do-it-yourself affair. It's not a business of, well, I like this seems good to me, this suits me, this is my way of developing, my going for refuge. Oh dear, if I hear that term again. It's not a mix and match affair. You're actually trying to learn from somebody who has experienced the true nature of reality. You're trying to open yourself up to the Buddha. And you're trying to open yourself up to the Buddha as explained and clarified, as mediated by Bhante, by Sangharakshita. Bhante has understood the Buddha's message. He's found a way of putting it which relates to us in our own situation, in the modern world. Listen to it. That's what you're here for. If you want to be ordained, that's what you're doing. You're opening yourself up to the Buddha through Bhante. And, Buddhism isn't philosophy in the sense of, a complete skepticism and a construction of your own system. It's more, in Western terms, and I speak advisedly, theology, where you're opening up to an experience that somebody else has had and which he is trying to reveal to you, to express to you. So your effort is to understand that message as expressed by the Buddha, as understood and mediated to us by Sangharakshita. So the whole thing starts with the Buddha's transcendental insight. We're trying to understand that and using Sangharakshita's very clear understanding of it, which is entirely appropriate to our situation. We're using that as our entry to enlightenment. So we're definitely trying to understand what someone else is saying. We're not trying to make it up for ourselves. Yes, we have to think for ourselves, but that thinking for ourselves is a thinking about what the Buddha, through Bhante, says, if you see what I mean. It's a question of trying to get to grips with their teaching, or the Buddha's teaching, the Dharma itself, coming through the Buddha and Bhante. That's what our thinking for ourselves is about. It's not sort of saying, well, I don't want to read these Buddhist books. I want to sort of, speak from my own understanding or something like that. Well, it's your own understanding of Sangharakshita's teaching of the Buddha's Dharma. So you must be thoroughly immersed in that. There's nothing wrong with reading and studying more broadly other presentations of the Dharma. Nothing wrong with reading, well, other traditions and so on, outside the Dharma. But when you're ready, are you really deeply enough immersed in Sangharakshita's presentation of the Buddha's Dharma? Are you really deeply enough immersed in that to be able to make anything useful of the great sort of welter of material that's available to you? You need a very, very firm base, most of us anyway, need a very, very firm basis in Bhante's presentation of the teaching. And you need to start from that. And yes, maybe at some point later, then you can start to broaden out. Some people, have got a very good understanding already, but most of you haven't. You need to much more, you need to get to grips much more with Sangharakshita's presentation. And so I'm thinking that, we're talking about 5 or 10 years of really deep immersion in Sangharakshita's presentation of the Dharma. And then maybe you can think about spreading your net a bit more widely. I don't mean that you never read another Dharma book or whatever, but, be very careful not to sort of open yourself up to influences which you're not really able to assimilate, because you haven't assimilated deeply enough that basic structure, that basic approach to the Dharma, which you're getting from Sangharakshita. I have seen so much confusion spread in the movement through a premature, absorption of teachings from Thich Nhat Hanh, Trungpa Rinpoche, whatever. Maybe there are useful things there, but I think they're only useful if you've already based yourself in that basic presentation of Sangharakshita. It all hangs together. Bhante's built something. It all hangs together. It all makes sense. Every practice fits in. Every teaching is structured. It's all part of a single whole. And you need to understand that single whole before you're able to see how other things fit into it. So you need to have got a kind of intuitive and a broad conceptual grasp of that integral whole, that system of spiritual discipline, which Bhante has set out for us, before you start to try and fit other things in. Leave that to the more experienced, those who've really soaked themselves in it. A really good, solid immersion in Bhante's teaching, I think, is something essential to everybody. There's certain vital principles you must grasp. So study Sangharakshita intensively. Leave other things for the time being. Of course, there are some of Sangharakshita's disciples who also present his teaching. I personally try just to present Bhante's teaching as I understand it. I don't try to borrow from other fields unless I think there's something that amplifies what Bhante has to say about the Buddha's teaching. So, the teachings of some of Bhante's disciples, you can take as coming from him. So I'm not sort of saying don't listen any more widely. And then again, I'm not saying don't ever read another Dharma book, but read it very, very carefully on the basis of that central understanding. Sometimes I'm a bit concerned when I see the things that people read and the things that they say about what they read. They're just confusing themselves with a whole lot of things they're not really sufficiently spiritually clear about to assimilate. So there's no question of ordination if you're not thoroughly soaked in Sangharakshita's basic teaching, or if you're likely to get confused with other teachings. Later you can start to broaden out, and you can start to innovate, but first of all you must build that basis. It's not just a question of being able to study that basis, it's also a question of being able to present it. So you need to be careful, you need to be learning to present the Dharma from that particular perspective. You should be able to teach the Dharma, because order members will very, very quickly be required to start teaching the Dharma. So you need to soak yourself in that basic perspective so that you can start to, if you haven't already, as some of you have, start to present it to others. And present that to them, not your own sort of mix and match, bits of this, bits of that, and so forth. You're trying to present your understanding of Sangharakshita's presentation of ultimate reality as perceived by the Buddha. So don't try to be original, don't try to be creative, just try to understand the teachings of Bhante, and, well, you will be original, you will be creative. If you've really understood it, you'll be presenting your own presentation of it. Even if it's faithful almost to the word to what Bhante has to say, you will be presenting that. I remember when I used to first give talks, when I was first ordained, I used to just give Bhante's lectures. I remember I used to do a course on the Noble Eightfold Path, and I used to tell the same jokes even. Perhaps that's going a bit far. But it certainly wasn't that I was, just sort of mouthing it. I had thought about it very deeply, and I felt this was a very clear way to present the teaching. And I wasn't afraid just to reproduce what I learned from Bhante. And people used to respond very strongly. They didn't feel it was just some sort of mouthpiece wagging at them. So I think don't be frightened of that. There's a terrible cult of originality, and it's just useless. Most people aren't able to be original in that sense yet. Yes, you can be original in the sense of really absorbing and just presenting it for yourself. But don't try to be original. Then there's a need to absorb and accept the basic principles which Sangharakshita has laid out. For instance, there's the dreaded single-sex principle. This is not negotiable. It's not, something that may work, in England, for all those hung-up English people with their terrible sexual problems. Well, you didn't know about them. It's not that, now we come to the healthy America, you don't need to do this. Bhante certainly doesn't see things like that. He sees that the single-sex idea is applicable the world over. Men and women need a rest from each other, and their spiritual interests are by and large best served by spending as much time as possible apart. And as he says, there should be a strong single-sex element in the life of any serious practitioner. So, take that on board. And there are other principles like this. Recognise that they're not negotiable. You can't sort of think, oh, well, I'll just wait until I'm ordained and then, I'll do it the way I think's best. This is part of the way the order functions. It's part of Bhante's vision for the order. He sees that this is essential. Yes. I think that in some ways it's even more applicable here, perhaps, than many other places. I think the American way of life is very strong. And the Dharma will not survive without a strong core of people who do live much of their lives within single-sex situations. I think it'd be very, very difficult to communicate the radical depths of spiritual community without that. Not that those living outside those communities won't be experiencing that, but I think they'll be able to experience it all the more and all the better because there are effective spiritual communities. So recognise this principle and support it. Support the single-sex principle. Support single-sex communities. They're very difficult to get going. And it's certainly been difficult here, I know, over the years. So support it. Don't knock it. Don't undermine it. Give it your support. Recognise that it's something difficult that needs your support. And I think in terms at some point in your own life of spending a good long period in a single-sex community. I think everybody should have that experience at some point. It doesn't mean that you break your marriage up, but at some point, you may, it would be good, I think, it would be almost essential that you spend quite a long period in a single-sex community. The sooner the better. Wow.